Botswana plans to make itself a regional gateway in its financial services sector. 10 years ago, exchange controls were removed and investors were invited into the country with attractive incentives like a 15% corporate tax rate.
Broadly speaking, Botswana financial sector comprises of 7 commercial banks and 1 merchant bank. Going back at the history of banking, we had Barclays and Standard Chartered Bank that were the pioneers of banking in Botswana. They were set up in the early 1950s, which was then followed in the 1980s by Bank of Credit and Commerce. Subsequent to that, we've seen a number of players coming into the market. We saw Capital Bank that came into the market last year, but prior to that we saw Bank of Baroda, Capital Bank, Bank Habaroni, and Stanbic as well over the number of years.
And it seems as though there's still room for more players.
I think there's probably still scope for more banks, maybe certain more specialised banks. But I think in general it's quite competitive, and banks are quite aggressive in competing for market share. They're not particularly aggressive on competing in terms of fees and costs. I think that's one area where there's a problem. I think the cost of banking is fairly high, and certainly the banks are extremely profitable, so there's scope for competition to bring the costs of banking down. But in terms of product and service innovation, I think it's quite strong.
The Botswana Stock Exchange is over 20 years old. It's comprised of 2 indexes, and it's no surprise that it's the foreign companies index, particularly the commodity-based stocks, that have plummeted. But despite that, the bourse has recorded a record turnover in 2008.
The best year up to date for the BSC has been 2008, in spite of the crisis that took place towards the last quarter. If you take, for example, the turnover of the BSC, which could give you some idea of liquidity, how the liquidity has increased in the BSC. In 2006, our average turnover was something like 1.7 million pula per day. In 2007, it increased to about 3.4 million pula per day. And last year, we hit about 4.8 million pula per day. If you take the performance of the index, we have been hit, especially about about middle of October. Like I think every stock exchange in the world has been hit, but not to the extent that some other stock exchanges have got impacted. For example, our domestic company index, and the domestic company index, I must say, is the measure for the Botswana Stock Exchange, because we list foreign stocks. And up to 31st of December, we used to calculate the domestic company index, we used to calculate a foreign company index, and then an all company index. And the all company index was very biased towards the foreign companies because of their huge size in terms of market capitalization, and our indices are market capitalization weighted. If you take the domestic company index, we lost about 16.5% last year, which I think is good compared to what some of the other markets have lost.
Currently, the stocks that have suspended operation and suspension on the stock exchange pending publication of some announcement. I am aware that African Copper is currently suspended its operations because of some capital liquidity. There's also Diamondex, which has also suspended its operation in the Lerala, and it's actually put the workers on forced leave.
While 2009 looks to be a shaky year, there is still talk in the industry of the possible listing of a local retailer, Choppies.
We've got an indigenous chain store here called Choppies Supermarket, which has been rumored that is coming onto the market. So at least as of now, that's the only thing that we've heard, that Choppies Superstores will be coming onto the market.
And despite the global financial situation, plans to launch a commodity and derivatives exchange this year are still going ahead. This venture is expected to attract an initial capital investment of $75 million and plans to create subsidiaries in Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya and Zambia.
The Indian partners, Financial Technologies of India, through their multi-commodity exchange, are still confident and going ahead with the implementation of this project in 2009. They are taking a long-term view that despite a bullish nature of African commodities at the moment, it's still one of their headline objectives was to improve price discovery and partner or set up subsidiary exchanges in certain key African countries, and they have a long-term business plan, and they still want to continue with that. So that's still ongoing.